sweaty because I live in an apartment where there's a bunch of lazy people who will buy a big screen TV and throw the whole freaking box in the dumpster, and it fills up very quickly. So now I have to be the one to be like, okay, now I have to break up the box because otherwise my trash isn't going to fit in the freaking dumpster. So I was doing that before I started filming. So I'm a little sweaty. Okay, so I didn't do a whole bunch of reading toward the end of this month. I was doing a lot of watching. So this one here, I'm not finished with it. I decided to take a break from it because this book here felt very slow, like slow paced. I understand the reasoning of why it would be slow paced because of the subject matter that's in the book. But there needs to be something else going on in the story to keep me invested. So this one here is the second book in that like zombie series. I can't remember the name of it. I had said it before. I may have to go on to Goodreads to look it up. But this one's the Say You'll Never Let Go. And this one here has the characters of Kara and Wade. Now they talked about Wade in the previous book, that first book I read this month that I really enjoyed. The one character talked about his friend Wade and how he never saw his friend Wade again. It was like how many years later, and he's like, he hopes that his friend's still alive. But he kind of like has this thing of like, there's a possibility his friend is probably dead. In this book here, they have it to where Wade is alive. And he went to go look for a girl he knew in foster care that he ended up caring deeply about. Yeah, obviously he's in love with her. And so this one has it to where he goes to find her and he ends up getting taken by, I didn't get through the book to the end, so I'm suspecting it's some type of like military outlet that went rogue. Like, you know, just because you're in the military doesn't mean you're a good person. I'll just say that. So he ended up getting captured by these people. This one person who's named Silas, who's like the head of like running this, whatever the heck it is. And the man, poor Wade, was unfortunately tortured, isolated, was held in isolation for many years. And from what the way the book was done, I would say it was implied that Wade also probably dealt with sexual abuse. That's where I'm getting from the book. So we're not dealing with a bunch of what they called in the first book. We're not dealing with a bunch of, what were they called again? Rotters. That's what it was. We're not dealing with a bunch of rotters in this, which I'm like, don't call it a zombie romance if there's not going to be zombies in it. I'm just saying, like, you know, you need to have a good amount of action going on. So the character of Kara, she's pretty much a badass. Like, she has dealt with a lot of things over the years. Like, she dealt with foster care, and the only connection she really had was with like Wade and I believe the other guy, the first guy from the first romance. Now I can't remember his name. I'm terrible with names. So they all know each other through the foster care system. So that was the only really connection that they had formed with each other. And so I think she almost got assaulted during her time in foster care, and Wade like had protected her. So in here, it's almost like she's doing what Wade has been doing with her for how many years, is protection. So Kara first thought, you know, Wade had possibly died, and then she ended up hearing through like other people that Wade was actually captured and he's been he was being held captive. So she was going around Silas's men and just wrecking havoc and just like basically trying to kill them to get to Wade. So finally Silas was like, I'm done with this shit. And so Silas had took Wade and dumped him basically in the area where he knew Kara was going to be. Dumped him in that area. Wade is now like high on drugs. Like they had did something to gave him some kind of drugs, probably like some kind of psychedelics or something. And he is like, doesn't know where he's at. He's it's like a caged animal. That's the only way I can think of Wade as. He's like a caged animal at this point because of, when you treat a human inhumanely, yeah, they can turn into a monster. So his character is dealing with a lot of stuff. And like I said, I'm going with the implication of things that Wade had said that he dealt with in isolation and his torture and all that stuff. So we're dealing with a book that's very emotional, very emotional. He's dealing with a lot of different mental issues because of how he was treated, So it takes a lot to get this person out of that survival mode they were in for how many years, So Kara's trying to do that. He's now they're in a house and, she's trying to like take care of him and try to, obviously keep her distance because he can like snap at any minute and like try to put his hands around her and stuff like that. So she's dealing with that. And the other guy who keeps showing up, his name was Lucas, I think. Lucas obviously is interested in her and wants to be with her, but she's not interested in him. And so she keeps kind of like telling him like, hey, back the fuck off, leave us alone. And so they end up moving from this house they were staying in to this other place in this other area. So she could try to get, Wade back to how he was again, which who knows if he ever will be in that, type of situation. Everybody deals with trauma differently, like not everybody can snap back from that trauma, some people are very different from it. So this one here is very emotional, and this, his character, Wade, is dealing with a lot of different mental issues, and he's now, he's more comfortable with her now, but he doesn't want anybody else around, and then, like I said, you're not seeing like a bunch of rotters. You're not seeing like different things like that. So you're not dealing with like a bunch of zombie people, you're dealing with other people, other people that have now, gone through all of this stuff for this post-apocalyptic kind of world. People change, when it comes to, those types of situations, like survival situations. How would you be in any type of survival kind of situation? Like, are you going to be the type where you're going to go into like this fight or flight mode? How would you be? Like, nobody knows until they're in that situation, Are you going to be like one of those people that takes charge, or are you going to be the one that cowers and you need everyone else to kind of help you? So everyone has different ways of dealing with, those types of situations, survival situations. So I stopped the book for a little while because I'm like, it's like boring me, like it was very slow. And I'm like, okay, when are we going to get to like something else? Like if it's not like, I understand like maybe taking time with like the romantic relationship, completely understand. But there needs to be something else going on in the story to kind of keep me going. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a break because I'm like, this one here is just slow. and I need something else to kind of help, like, keep it going. Like, maybe they're dealing with rotters, that type of thing, you know? At least it'll keep it more exciting, you know? So I ended up pausing that one for now until I can, you know, feel well enough to where I'm like, okay, I'll try to get back into it and see if I can do it. Because I do want to read the other books in the series. So I'm either going to try to get through it, after I get through the book I'm currently reading now, maybe delve back into it, or if I'm just going to like DNF it for now and, go into like the next book in the series, So this one here, like I said, it felt a little more slow, where with the first book, it was a little more fast paced because they're dealing with like rotters and they're dealing with other people and their shit, like people like, there are people out there who are not the type of people who would be like, hey, let's work together. Let's go and share everything together. I'm that type of person where I'd be like, hey, let's work together and we can all do our jobs to like help keep each other alive. Where there are plenty of people out there who are greedy, selfish, people who only care about themselves. I understand why they are the way they are, but again, they are more of a hindrance to society than they are a help. Like how many people who will steal just because they can, just because they want to. And it's not because, oh, well, I really needed that bread. Did you really need that big screen TV too? Okay. So yeah, I do not agree with that. You don't need that. That's not a need. That is not a need. Bread is a need. Filling your belly is a need. Stealing electronics, stealing big screen TVs, that's not a need. That's just you being a looter. So for me, I was like, I wanted something else to kind of like keep it going in the story. Something else kind of needed that push to keep going. Like I said, I understood the reason of maybe like not getting these characters together like way too quickly, because like I said, there was that implication of there's a possibility that he was sexually abused, sexually assaulted. Yeah, that takes time. That takes time to heal. So that's why for me, I was like, I'm gonna take a break on this and I'm gonna hope I can get back into it again and finish it off, and go from there. So I ended up delving into other things. This one here. I ended up listening to the audiobook of this book, 'Twas the Night After Christmas. So this is the Hellions of Halstead Hall, book number 6. And a part of the Duke's Men, this is like 0.5. Honestly, this author had it to where I don't want to read any more books from her. No, I don't. She is kind of like, these books here are kind of in the, I have a feeling that they're more modern, and these are historical romances, okay? I'm not into modern. I'm not. This author, I felt like she was giving me like a lecture on like what women have dealt with over the years, like in the 1800s and all that stuff. I get it. I've read women's history. I don't need to be lectured. So yeah, this one really pissed me off. So I ended up giving a 3 to be nice. I really wanted to give it a 2 or a 1. So we have the character of Pierce Waverly. He's the Earl of Devonmont, and he's 31. And Mrs. Camilla Stewart, she's roughly around the same age, probably late 20s or so. So Pierce Waverly has grown up to be a very cold and distant man, relegating his life to meaningless sexual encounters with mistresses. He just recently moved on from his last relationship when he gets a letter from his mother's companion, Miss Camilla Stewart, informing him that his mother is gravely ill. He rushes to his Montcliff estate only to realize that his mother is in perfect health. Pierce had essentially gotten abandoned by his parents when he was 8 years old and sent off to be with his older cousin, Mr. Titus Waverly, at Waverly Farm at every holiday when he wasn't in boarding school. So he didn't see his mother and father for many years after the age of 8. When he was 13 years old, his cousin Titus and his wife were killed in a boating accident, so Titus's father, General Isaac Waverly, took over the raising of Pierce and Titus's children. When Pierce was 21, he went home in a rage to confront his parents, and that didn't go over well. And the next time he saw his mother was when he was 29 at his father's funeral. So how many years he hadn't seen his mother, or, she would write to him, but he would not want to write it to her back. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being an 8-year-old boy and your parents essentially just abandon you for no reason? You don't know why. You don't know why. But your mom sends you letters, saying, oh, I love you and everything. But they don't pick you up from boarding school. You have to every summer, every vacation, you got to go hang out with your cousins and your uncle. And they're the ones that are, can you imagine? Can you imagine? So Camilla Stewart has been working for Lady Devonmont for 6 months after Camilla's husband died, leaving her and her 6-year-old son Jasper destitute. And when she sees Lady Devonmont crying at her 50th birthday celebration, good, fuck her. Camilla is certain that Pierce is a heartless man for not visiting his mother during the holidays, so she decides to pen a letter to the Earl to fake an illness for the lady. Unfortunately, she didn't expect the Earl to arrive so soon. This is the more time he spends with Camilla, the more attracted to her he becomes. So my thoughts, I said, this book pissed me off. I said, I felt like I was being lectured to by the author. Throughout the book, the only person I felt sorry for was Pierce. He grew up without his parents. The only family he saw was the Waverleys that were his cousins. For years, he thought his mother didn't love him. Then after his father's death, his mother could have told him the truth of why he was forced away, but she never did. It wasn't until Camilla, what the heck did I say? Okay, it wasn't until Camilla that towards the end of the book, we find out the truth. So the mother pissed me off. I could sympathize with the woman, but once her husband died, she could have mended the relationship with her son, and she chose to remain stubborn. I also got mad at Pierce when he wanted to make Camilla his mistress and involving her son Jasper, who would have gotten the brunt of the mockery of society, if it was found out. He didn't even think how that boy would have felt until after Pierce left his family home and went back to London. I said, this whole book just made me mad and depressed. And it did. Because you end up finding out what was the reason of why the father had essentially sent Pierce away. The mother cheated. The mother cheated with the man she was previously engaged to. She couldn't marry him because he didn't have money and funds, and her parents would have, essentially abandoned her. So she had to marry somebody with money. So she married Pierce's father, who was, clearly a jackhole. So she goes and she gives in when, the other guy pops up again, and she has an affair with the man. And I'm like, did you even think about your son? You just thought about your twat. I'm sorry, lady. That pisses me off. When they say, men think with their dicks, women will think with their coochies, too. It's the same way. To me, I'm like, woman, you knew the risks if you were caught. You knew your husband would get upset. So why would you have an affair with this man? I know you love the man still. You couldn't be with him. She could have went and said, if you love me that much, you can wait for me. Wait for this fucker to die, and go from there. Or move on with your life, If the person's not willing to wait, move on with your life, That's just, it's how it was back in the day. Was it fair? No, it was not fair. But still, you ruined your son's life for 5 minutes of pleasure. I'm sorry. I feel sorry for Pierce. I really do. My heart was with him the whole book, except for the part where he wanted to make Camilla his mistress. And then I was like, dude, don't be a jackass. Don't be a jackass. You know what it's like to be abandoned or have people pick on you. Like, he was teased when he was younger because he had asthma and he was, obviously a bit of a mama's boy. So imagine being a mama's boy and your mom abandons you. It's the only person you had for comfort, and now that person's gone. So the book really fucking pissed me off. And then the mother was like, well, I can't tell you what happened, so you just need to just forgive me. Excuse me? We need to forgive you? He has no fucking idea why you abandoned him. And now you just want him to be like, la-di-da, it's okay, mother. It's okay. I can forget the abandonment. Fuck you. Oh man, that woman pissed me off. She pissed me off. I was like, you know what? I really wish she was gravely ill. And she died because she was a selfish woman. Selfish woman. And I don't care, like, she was like, oh, she treated Jasper very well, Camilla's son and everything like that. And that's fine. That's fine. But it's like, oh, now you're making up for lost time. Now you're making up for it. No. It just really pissed me off because she was like, well, I didn't want, you to be disinherited and blah, blah, blah. And all this. Who gives a fuck? Who cares? Who cares if he gets disinherited? Who cares at this point? Oh my God. She annoyed me. And like I said, when it came to Camilla, with her, she frustrated me in a way because she was like, oh, well, I'll have this one night of pleasure with Pierce. And I'm like, girl, come on. Come on, girl. Come on. I'll just have this one night with Pierce, And she ends up getting caught by her, his mother. And I'm just like, girl, come on. And then I felt like everything for that little boy, for Jasper, was an afterthought. That's what I thought, was an afterthought. My kids come first. That's something I told my husband, when I first met him. I had told him, I said, my kids come first. My kids come first. Now, I will not take my kids' side on everything, especially if they were being like bad, toward, my husband. I would correct them and say, no, you need to, listen to him when he's telling you something, You can't just go and just treat him like crap just because he's not your real father. That's not right. This man's raising you, especially because my ex, he was not a very good father, a very absentee parent. And then he had passed away. So it's like, you need somebody who's like a father figure in your children's lives, Fathers matter. So when it comes to Camilla, I was like, girl, you have your son. You need to make sure that your son, comes first. And I just didn't like how she kind of like she just gave up willingly, to sleep with Pierce. Also, I will say I did not like the narrator's voice in here. He made Pierce sound like crotchety and old when the man was like only 31, So it's like you're making this guy sound crotchety and old and just, I don't know, I did not like the narrator. I did not like his voice. So it made me dislike the book even more. And like I said, if I wanted to, I could have gave the book 1 or 2 stars. I ended up giving it a 3 to be nice. But I really don't see myself going back to this author for any of her newer books because that book pissed me off so much. And I'm like, is this how it's going to be? Like I said, it felt like I was being lectured to because it's like, oh, well, you don't know what it's like to be a woman. And it's like, oh, shut up. I'm so tired of that. bullshit. You don't know what it's like to be a woman. And it's like, yeah, I realized back in the day, things were very hard for women. You know, I totally get it. But it just annoyed me, that whole, like, you have no idea what it's like. And you have no idea what it's like to be a man. There you go. I'm going to give it back to you. You have no idea what it's like to be a man. To put on a bunch of responsibility. To take care of people. Financially. You know? There's plenty of men out there who have a lot of burdens. You know? So, I just hate this whole, like, oh, men are better. No, women are better. And it's like, how about the fact that if we work together, we can do beautiful things. We just have to work together and not constantly fight with each other. So tired of the gender wars. So tired. So fucking exhausted by it. I don't give a shit. I don't care. Go ahead, hate each other. And then guess what? The human race will die. That's what's going to happen. If nobody goes and gets together and learns to get along and has children, guess what? No more kids. No more people. Then we go extinct. So I just was like, this felt like a lecture to me. And I was like, so yeah, I don't like the newer historicals. They really piss me off. I don't like the ones back in the 70s and 80s either, where it's like, oh, you know, it's okay to, you know, sexually assault a woman. No, clearly I don't like that either. I like a good middle. And, yeah, this one here just really pissed me off. So I gave it a 3. So the last one I'll mention before I go into other stuff that I've watched or listened to. I am currently reading this one here. So this one's just this once. This is part of the King family, The Kings, by Lena Hendricks. I think I've tried reading Lena Hendricks before, and I think I've DNF'd some other books, but I thought I would delve into this because it sounded interesting. I do like small town. So this town is, oh, it's got like a weird name to it. But it's like this small town in Michigan. And we've got the characters. Let me look at my other thing. Did I write it down yet? No, I haven't. I haven't even wrote. Oh, no, I did. I like to write down notes as I'm reading. So the characters are Emily Ward, and his name is William, but he goes by Whip King. Now you got the family of, kind of reminds me a bit of, if anybody's ever read, what's the author's name again? Claire Kingsley, I think. She had this series where it's like you had these this family that there was like this other family that they didn't get along with and all that stuff, so they constantly play pranks on them. This is kind of like the same thing, very similar, where you got the Kings and the Sullivans, and the Kings and Sullivans have not liked each other for years. I don't know why they don't, but they don't, and so they kind of like do pranks on each other all the time. And so that's basically what this one character does. Whip is he ends up plays pranks on the Sullivans, and the Sullivans do the same thing to him, you know, that stuff. So Emily, she was living in Virginia, and her parents had moved to this small town like 2 or 3 years ago. And so she decided to, since she had visited her parents often, she decided to move to this town too because she liked it and she thought it was pretty. And so she really needed something of, you know, of a change and all that stuff. Because the previous boyfriend she was dating was, you know, I'd say probably a gaslighter and all that stuff. He didn't treat her very well. He used her and all that stuff. So she wanted something different. So she is currently a substitute teacher, and she's trying to get on, you know, for a more permanent role, even though substitute teachers get paid pretty good. But still, you know, you obviously want something that's a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 type of job, you know, a little more consistent. So she's working as a substitute at this middle school. And one night she goes out. Where was she? Was she at a bar? Something like that. She goes out and she ends up running into Whip. Oh no, that's what it was. She had gone on a blind date because her mother keeps like trying to set her up. She goes on this date and it's like a date from hell. She ends up like leaving the date, ends up going to like a little like almost maybe like a 7-Eleven or something, you know, kind of like a convenience store. Ends up going to this convenience store and it's like after Valentine's Day, so she's looking for the candy that's like on sale. And I'm like, girl, same. Same. I'm looking for the candy that's on sale. So she goes and finds this candy and she's sitting down, she's eating it, you know, on one of the aisles, and Whip ends up coming up to her and he sees her and he's like, you know, like, what's going on? You know, kind of thing. So he sits down with her and he starts eating the candy and they end up like hitting it off. And they end up having like a one-night stand. What I liked about this story, though, what I liked about the beginning part of this is the fact that I haven't finished it yet. I am enjoying it. But the thing that about this one, where there are how many one-night stands I've read before, where it's like they kind of show everything with that one-night stand, and then you kind of have to wait, you know, until like they do it again, you know, which is like maybe like 50% into the book. So with this one, the author had it to where they're kind of like getting hot and heavy, but that's it. It kind of fades out. And then it goes into the next chapter and the heroine, you know, Emily, she's just kind of thinking about, you know, like having those thoughts of like him and her, like they had sex, obviously how many times, like during that night and everything. Oh, damn it, my fan. I gotta charge my fan. I have one of these fans here that I kind of keep on me that helps me from, you know, getting all sweaty, and you charge it. So I gotta charge it. Either that or it died. I hope it didn't die. I hope I just have to charge it. Anyways, so they have like one night stand and everything, and I plugged it in, so hopefully that'll work. So then, like, afterwards, she goes and looks in his closet and notices that he has firefighter, like, clothes and stuff like that. You know, because the firefighters have to wear a uniform and all that stuff. So she sees it and she's like, oh, shit. So she goes and gives him a high five. Bolts and bolts and gets out of there. And he's like, what the fuck? You know, like, you know, what the hell? But he has like what's it called? A Jacob's ladder on his peen. If anybody doesn't know what that is, it's piercings on his hoo-ha. That is like multiple piercings and stuff. I've never been with a guy who had anything like that. I've never seen one. I'll just say I've only seen pictures when I've looked them up online. I've only seen the pictures. Otherwise, I've never seen one like close up. So I have no idea what it would be like. But she goes and, you know, had obviously a good time, but ends up finding out, oh crap, he's a firefighter and her father is the police chief. So she's like, oh crap. I don't want to date, you know, I don't want to date a firefighter because, you know, her dad told her, you know, it's not her real dad, it's her stepdad. Her stepdad told her that, you know, these firefighters can be kind of like sketchy because, you know, they're kind of on again, off again, you know, things like that. You know, they have their like on shift, off shift and all that stuff. So, it's, you know, maybe their girlfriends or wives don't see them for how many days. So some of these men can, you know, sleep around. So, especially if they have a firefighter body, I'm just saying, you know. So anyways, he has a firefighter body. And so far I'm liking it so far because he obviously knows now, you know, that she is his police chief's daughter, and he's still kind of like, I'm supposed to stay away from her, you know, because, you know, you shouldn't shit where you eat, but still he's like, I'm super attracted to her and I want to go at it again. And so she's kind of like going on these dates and stuff, and they're not, you know, any good. I'm getting toward the bottom, and I'm getting fruit stuck in the straw. So that's what I've read kind of so far. And so far, I am enjoying it. I will continue on with the series as long as it's good. As long as it's good and it keeps me going, then I'll keep reading the series. So that's all I've read for the rest of this month. I ended up delving into some TV shows, like limited series, things like that. I've been watching Asian dramas lately, whether it's a Chinese drama, Japanese, Korean, whatever have you, Filipino, you know, whatever. If it sounds good, I will check it out. And so I've been, because I ended up discovering Pursuit of Jade on Instagram. I was like, oh, it's on Netflix. I'm going to binge watch the series. So I binge watched the whole series. And the way Asian dramas are, they usually don't go like multiple seasons. Usually they don't. You know, you usually don't have multiple seasons. So it's a whole big, you know, series. So you'll have maybe like 40 episodes, and then that's it. And then, you know, it's done, you know. Like there's a series that used to be on Netflix that I loved called Meteor Garden. And it was based on, it was based on like, that was the Chinese version. There was also like, I think a Filipino version, and maybe a Korean version. There was another one that was called Boys Over Flowers. I did watch that one, but I will say I liked Meteor Garden the best because I have seen the other versions. But I liked Meteor Garden the best. And Netflix doesn't have it anymore on there. That's the thing I hate about streaming, is that after a while they take it off. So luckily, I will say I did find the DVD of the series on Amazon. So I'm going to purchase it. And as long as it gives me, as long as I can go and do the English subtitles, I am good. I am good. I don't care if it has like, you know, Mandarin on it and, you know, Asian writing and all that stuff, which I guess you'd say Mandarin, because I think Mandarin is like the most popular of the languages is that. I think it's the most popular because there's a lot of Chinese people out there in the world. And plus there's other people who speak Mandarin as well. I'm assuming Japanese is different. I'm assuming it's different because it's a different country. It's like the same thing with like, there's Mexico and there's Spain. Spain obviously is going to have different dialects than Mexico has, you know? So you could be speaking Spanish to somebody and you probably would get most of it, but there might be some slang terms that maybe Spain has that Mexico doesn't have, you know, or vice versa. So it could be the same thing where they could be speaking the same language, but maybe they're not understanding certain dialects, you know, or certain things. Like, for instance, in America, you know, we have it to where if you have a real thick, like there's those Bostonian or Massachusetts, which isn't always the case. You know, not everybody talks like with a Boston accent. A lot of it's like, a lot of it ends up being like embellished, you know. But there are people who, they do have, you know, that type of thick type of, you know, slang, you know, where they say car keys, you know, not everybody says that, you know, in Massachusetts or in Boston area and all that stuff. So not everybody speaks like that. But you have certain areas of the country where they will say something and you're like, what? Like down in the South, you know, people, you might have certain terms that they say, I remember my grandparents, because my grandfather was a part of the airports, you know, he used to be employed with American Airlines. They would get transferred to different areas. And so my grandparents ended up moving to Texas. And my mom said she did not want to go to school in Texas. My uncle ended up going there, and they had said, put your books up. And so he put his books up. I guess that put your books up meant put your books away. And so the teacher thought he was joking around. And it's like, well, when you live in the East Coast, New York area for how many years, and then you go down to the South, there are certain things that maybe they say there that you're like, what? You know, what does that mean? So it's the same thing with like, I would assume and someone would have to correct me if I'm wrong. I would assume that maybe Chinese people and Japanese people probably understand each other for the most part, you know, but maybe there's certain things that they may not understand. So it's the same thing with like here in America where somebody is speaking like really Southern and, you know, someone from the East Coast may be like, what the fuck are they saying, you know? So it could be like that. So, and some, you know, some people in the South have really thick Southern accents where I'm like, I have no idea what this person's saying. Like if someone's from like Cajun country and things like that, you know, like that type of area, you know, you have a real thick Cajun accent, I could be like, I have no idea what this person's saying. Or like, see, in Europe, like in Britain, there's some really thick English accents. So it depends on the area of England that you're from. You know, you have like Welsh, you know, and then you have this area, you know. So I'm sure there's probably different types of like dialect that changes and all that stuff. Anyways, I'm really going into a whole lot of stuff here that people probably think is really boring. But anyways, like I said, obviously Mandarin is a very popular language, you know? So for me, I decided to delve into and finish Pursuit of Jade, which I loved that one. I love that one. I thought it was really good. And I really enjoyed myself watching that. And I would I really want to rewatch it again because I really enjoyed it. So I'm really going to be really butchering the names, and I'm really sorry about that. But the way they say the names is completely different than how I would say it. So this one here is a historical. It's also, I would consider it fantasy because there's fantasy elements to it, like the way this person jumps and does this and this. And I'm like, that would not be humanly possible. You know, like you would hurt yourself if you fell from that depth, you know, and all that stuff. And there's things that happen in the series where it's like she falls off this cliff and I'm like, oh man, that girl would be dead. She would be dead, but she survives, you know, that type of thing. So it's like a lot of different things, different fantastical elements to the series where you're like, well, that don't make sense. But to me, I think about it as, you know, like there was a movie there, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and they kind of had the same thing where they kind of almost like they're floating on air kind of thing. That's the way I kind of think about it, you know, because Asian dramas tend to be more fantastical kind of thing, you know. I kind of look at it as more, it's kind of has more fantasy elements and things like that, you know. Also, it's a drama, but it is not historically accurate. I will say that. Not historically accurate, which it's okay because it's fictional story. There's romance, there's action, there's war, fighting, deaths in here and all that stuff. Really interesting show. I really, really enjoyed it. So we got the characters of, she goes by Fan Shang Yu. I think the way, and someone would have to correct me if they're Asian, I believe you put the last name first when you're talking to them. So they always kept saying Fan Shang Yu, but I believe her first name is Shang Yu, you know, Shang Yu. Like I said, I'm going to butcher the names. Her name is Shang Yu, and she's a pig butcher. In a small village. Her parents are recently deceased, so she is taking care of her little sister, Fan. It's like Shangling, with the help from Mr. and Mrs. Zhao, her next door neighbors. Oh, the little girl, she was so cute. I loved her. She was so adorable. I loved her. One night coming home, Shang Yu trips in the snow and realizes that she tripped over a man. She at first was going to leave him there because she thought maybe like he was probably dead or close to dead. And she was like, you know, mind your business, you know, kind of thing. But she ends up rescuing him and bringing him back to her home. Shang Yu, with the help of her neighbors, bring the man. He goes by Yang Zhang. That's not his real name. He's using a fake name. Back to health. Yang Zhang's real name is, I want to say Zi Zhang. He is the Marquis of Wuhan. He was investigating the massacre of his family 16 years ago when an assassin's arrow injured him and killed how many of the soldiers in his military. Not realizing that Fan Shanyu's family also have a connection to the massacre that happened years ago. And so as we go through the series, we discover more and more of like the history and like their connection to each other, and not realizing they have this connection. So there's this romance between the two main characters. Then there are side romances between other characters. So there was war and battles in here. I said, so a good amount of action sequences in here. I said, there's political drama in here, secrets that bubble to the surface. There's also a revenge storyline. It's also comedy. There was many funny moments in this show that I was just busting up laughing. Like one of the scenes I will mention is with the character of Song Yan. That's Shang Yu's former fiance. So his mother, Madame Song, and her son call off the engagement and wanted the betrothal letter back. You know, there was this letter that they had, and she basically wanted it back. Because she clearly was looking for her son to marry someone with money. So Shang Yu said Madame Song can have the letter back if she can give money owed to the Fan family, because Shang Yu's family helped to pay for food and tuition in order for Song Yang to get an education to become a scholar. So Shang Yu's uncle is in a gambling debt, and so he wants to sell Shang Yu's house in order to pay it off. And because Shang Yu is a female, she isn't entitled to the house deed. So her and Cheng, Cheng, I'm gonna say Sing, get married in order for her to keep her house. So the man she rescued, she ended up marrying in order to keep the house, keep the deed. And so they have like this fake marriage. So they pretend to be a couple to help fool her uncle and the rest of the village. And I said, it's not historically accurate because there are times they're doing CPR. And I'm like, okay, that wasn't invented until like the 1960s. So I'm like, that's clearly not historically accurate. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to let it slide because this is a fantasy and it's fiction. So I'm like, I'm not going to be like too harsh on the historical accuracy and all that stuff. So I was like, whatever. I don't care. I'm enjoying myself. I don't care, So I said there was a couple of scenes in here that were so funny. There was multiple scenes. I could talk about this show for like hours because I loved it. It was really good. But there was this one scene where Shang Yu was discussing with Song Yan. Like I said, so bad with the names. I'm not doing it right. I'm sure there's Asians that are like, you're butchering the name. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I can't pronounce it correctly. They are kind of like discussing and almost having like an argument where she's kind of telling him like, I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Like you didn't want anything to do with my family anymore. So why do you keep bugging me kind of thing? And so Song is like, oh, well, you could be my concubine. And I'm like, excuse me? You want her basically to be like your mistress while you go and get married. And I'm like, so I was like, oh, hell no, girl, do not go and deal with that guy. So I will say I loved her character because she was a badass. She could kick ass in here. She kicked ass in here. So Song goes and grabs her arm, and Zhang, the injured man, goes and throws him. And I'm like, he was injured. He was still injured. He had like a crutch, and he just goes and takes him and goes whoop right out the door, like, get out of here, And he's kind of like, they're kind of like looking at each other, and Song's like, well, who are you? And he's like, basically kind of like taking her, kind of putting her by his side, and he's like, I'm an injured immigrant and all that stuff. And I'm just like, yep, I love that part. It was so funny. I was laughing my ass off. And I had commented on Instagram how I said, yeah, he threw him while he was injured. And so people like my comment, and it kind of brings me back to the reel of me keep seeing it again. I keep laughing. Every time I see the reel, I laugh. So I'm like, oh, keep giving me likes so I can keep coming back to the video. It's just so funny. And then there was the scene where Shan Yu was able to get more recognition for, you know, things that she was doing and all that stuff. I don't want to delve too much into it and do spoilers. But like after how many months Song Yan didn't see her, and he's now like a scholar and everything like that, but he's not really doing well for himself. He thought he would do better. And there's other things that happened. There was things in episodes in here that made me cry. There were people who got killed and slaughtered and stuff like that. It was sad too. There was sad parts to this show too that made me cry and get sad and everything. But this one here had it to where Son Yan hadn't seen Chen Yu in like months. He finally sees her again, and he's just like, holy crap. She's in this position. I never thought she would get in this position. So she's like telling him like, well, I don't need your help. You know, you don't need to teach me, you know. Sheng Yu doesn't know how to read really well. Like when it comes to like the characters and all that stuff of, you know, obviously Mandarin and everything and the symbols and all these things, she doesn't know everything because she, you know, she grew up poor. She didn't grow up with like wealth or money. So in order to get an education, you have to have money, you know, to be educated. So she obviously didn't know everything when it came to learning how to understand strategy and things like that, things that were written down. I'm like, same girl, because I have no idea what the heck any of that stuff says. They're trying to teach her. And so that's why Son Yang had ended up showing up, because he's a scholar. He knows how to read all this stuff and understand all the things and everything. And so after she kind of like tells him, I don't need your services, and he kind of like goes away, he ends up running into Zhang, who is the Marquis. I could say that name better, the Marquis of Wuhan. So he runs into the Marquis of Wuhan, who now is showing who he really is. He's not hiding himself. You know, he was basically trying to disguise himself in this village, you know, so he could heal, because, you know, he obviously was backstabbed by somebody and everything, and he wants to investigate and find out who did it, you know. And so he was disguising himself for how long in this village, you know, obviously from her too. He didn't tell her the truth until a certain time, and of course she was hurt by it when she finds out the truth of like who he is and everything. But he ends up, Song, who's the dipshit, like I said, her ex-fiance, runs into the Marquis of Wuhan, and the Marquis kind of giving him like this stare of like this death stare, this side death stare. And he goes and stares at Song for so long that Song faints. He passes out. I was laughing hysterical. And I was like, that's what you get, buddy. And I was like, you know, you were engaged to her, Chen Yu, and she would have taken care of you. You know, she would have, like, you know, she kept saying it to Zhang, you know, saying, like I said, I can't say his name right. It's Zheng. Zheng. She kept telling him, like, you don't have to go to war. You don't have to fight in a war. I'll take care of you. We'll slaughter pigs. And I was like, oh my God, it's so sweet. She was so sweet. Like, she just wanted to take care of him. She didn't want him to die. You know, like, she's thinking like he's in the lower classes and everything like that. And he's going to be like in the front lines and everything and going to get slaughtered and everything. So she's thinking like, oh, he's going to die. And she's like, you know, obviously fell for him and everything. It was so sweet. There was so many sweet moments in this series, and a lot of like different funny scenes and a lot of action, and it was really good. It was a really good series. Probably my one, like in my top 5 of favorite Asian dramas I've watched, you know, so far. Like I said, I loved Meteor Garden. I love that one. I would put that in my top 5 because I watched that one like frequently. I watched that one like a few times. And there were like episodes that were kind of like boring. I ended up skipping over and ended up like, you know, delving into the other ones and stuff like that. And this one here, like, this one also has like a little bit of, this one also has a bit of, like, it'll have like certain lulls to the show where it's like a little bit kind of like slow pace and stuff like that for certain things. So I'd say like if I were to rewatch this one again, which I will, there might be some episodes I might be like, skip over this one or skip over that episode and kind of like stick to like the stories. And also like there are other storylines going on too. Like You have like this villain character who he ends up like seeing this woman that he hadn't seen in how many years and realized that he had gotten her pregnant years ago. And she's been kind of like hiding from him because he's not a good person. You know, he's a bad person. He's trying to become emperor. And so it's basically kind of like their romance, but it's kind of like basically one-sided because she don't love him. He wants to control her. He wants to covet her. You know, he doesn't want anything to do with the kid, you know, their son, because the son could take over and kick him out of, you know, being emperor and all that stuff. And so, yeah, I did really enjoy their story, even though I was like, well, she deserves better because he is not a good person. He wants to control her. He doesn't want to, you know, that's not love, you know, and that's basically what she was trying to teach him. She was trying to teach him, like, what you're doing is not love. You know, that's not love. That's possession. That's, you know, control. Love is not that way, you know? And so she was trying to teach him, you know, like, you can't just keep me, you know? And all that stuff. And he just really was very controlling. So that was an interesting storyline going on in the series. And then we had another storyline where there's a princess and she was kind of like trying to hide herself from, you know, and kind of like she wanted to learn different things like that. She wanted to go, and she was doing like scholarly school and stuff like that. So she kind of was she was trying to like hide herself as a man. And I was like, girl, there's no way you could show yourself as a man. You're too pretty. You're too pretty to be a man. You're too pretty. And so the guy who was like he was a scholar, and he was working with the Marquis of Wuhan. He had a certain title. He was funny. I loved his character too. He would constantly tease the Marquis of Wuhan, constantly fuck with him. It was so funny. It was like this like camaraderie, this friendship they had, and it was hilarious. It was there were certain scenes that just kept me going and it just was funny. I love the humor of Asian dramas. I do. I think it's funny. I think it's so funny. So that one I really, really liked and really enjoyed. And I ended up giving like a 9 out of 10. And there was a few things that I was kind of like, you know, wasn't really a big fan of. But overall, I really, really enjoyed it. And that's why I said I ended up giving that one a 9 out of 10 because there were a lot of things in the show that I really enjoyed. And I would rewatch that one again. The next one I watched was Use for My Talent. This one's another one that's on Netflix. This one here, I liked this one less. It was a little too slow for me. A little too slow, and I wanted a little more angst or pining and things like that. So we got the character, this is modern. It takes place in China, and it's opposites attract kind of thing. So the characters are Gurenki, and like I said, Gu is his last name, G-U. Renki is like his first name. And then we got Si Sheng Zhao. Like I said, very hard for me to say. So he owns this cleaning company, and he has what they call mysophobia, which is germophobia. He has a germophobia, and you clearly know it is clearly how he grew up with his grandfather, and his grandfather was a hard ass. And he's a child that was born out of wedlock. So his grandfather's kind of like, you know, you were almost like a mistake. And it's like, that's so sad, you know? And so the kid always grew up wanting to impress his grandfather, wanted to, you know, show his grandfather, like, I can work hard and everything. And he developed this germophobia. And so he owns this cleaning company. And so he gets really kind of like, he'll hear like warning bells in his head, you know, of like someone trying to touch his hand, and it would be like, like in his head going off, and he's like, you know, doesn't want to touch this person. And so he constantly is spraying like antiseptic and things like that, and spraying things down and all that stuff. And he ends up running into Shisheng, ends up running into her, and she kind of like is kind of like a catastrophe. And so they end up getting to know each other, and she ends up getting hired at his company. And at first he like doesn't want her, you know, around, but the more time he watches her, the more he becomes like fascinated with her and attracted to her. And so they start like getting close to each other, and his germophobia starts to improve a bit, you know, when he's around her. And so he's like, oh, maybe she's like the cure of my germophobia, which no, it's, you know, there's really no cure for it. You have to learn to control, you know, control it and all that stuff, you know, learn to not get into that point of like having it uncontrolled. So he was working with like a therapist and all that stuff. And at first the therapist wanted to date her because he was, you know, he knew her. And so there was kind of like a little slight bit of a love triangle at one point. And then you realize that, you know, she really likes Renki really likes him, the boss. And so they start to get together. And like I said, it felt a little bit slow to me. There were parts of it that were kind of slow and also sad. There were a lot of emotional things because I felt bad for him because he grew up with his grandfather being really hard on him, and it caused him to feel like dirty, not good enough, not important enough. And I just felt really bad for his character. He dealt with a lot of different emotional things. And so there was a point where, you know, something happened and it caused the characters to kind of like break up. I did feel like they kind of got together like a little too quickly. And even toward the end of the show, like he was asking her like to marry him and stuff. And I was like, dude, this is it was a little too fast for me, where I was like, you should know her a little bit longer before you decide to marry her. And so like I said, did enjoy the show, but there were parts of it that kind of like bored me a little bit. Certain stuff that was kind of like, it could have been like, you know, like I said, I felt like it could have, there was more angst that I felt like that could have been happening with the show. But I did enjoy it. I think I ended up giving that one like, what did I give that one? Like a 6 out of 10. I gave it like a 6 out of 10. I thought it was fine. It's not something that I would rewatch again, but I did, for the most part, enjoy it. Like I said, there were certain things that I felt like were kind of slow and everything. And then I ended up watching this other one, which ended up giving it like a 5 out of 10. There were issues I had with it. This one's called Forever Love, and I found this one actually, the whole series, I ended up finding it on YouTube. I'll end up, if I remember, I'll leave a link in my description if you want to check it out. And it's like the video is like about 4 or 5 hours, but it's the whole series, and it doesn't have any commercials, you know, like, unless you have to deal with ads, you know, like if you have a YouTube and you don't, and you're not paying for premium, then you'll have to deal with ads. But I pay for YouTube Premium, so I don't have ads. So I was able to watch, you know, how much before I was like, okay, I need to take a break, and then I went back to it. So I was able to find it on YouTube, and there was how many other shows that you can find on YouTube too. So this one here was modern. The heroine is blind. There's action, there's romance. I'd say the heroine is blind for a short time. So the characters are, I say Lynn, but I think it's pronounced Lean, and Zintong. Her last name is Zintong. She's a blind heiress. Her father recently died, and she had an accident that had made her temporarily blind. People who are close to her are conspiring against her. Her father hires a bodyguard to protect her before he passed away. So Zin, I think it's pronounced Sheen Moyo. He is her bodyguard, but he isn't the real bodyguard that was hired. He is looking for documents that Lynn's father had. So I said, my thoughts, I was able to watch this whole show on YouTube, and it was all right. I gave it a 5 out of 10 because some parts of the show were silly. I said, I felt like the scenes with the heroine being blind were the best parts of the show, and those scenes were earlier on. I said, I felt like the actress didn't do a good blind woman well enough. I said, but she is newly blind, so I tried to overlook the actress's scenes. I said, she isn't blind for long when her vision comes back. So what that part I thought was really silly, because at the beginning, she shows that she ended up falling on a step and hit her head, and it caused her to become temporarily blind. So how does she get her vision back again? She hits her head again, and it causes her vision to come back. And I'm like, I don't think it works like that. I'm pretty sure it don't work like that. So I thought that part was silly, where it's like she ended up like slipping in the tub and end up hitting her head. And he was like very much protecting her, but he also was investigating her father because he was suspecting her father had something to do with why his family ended up becoming destitute and broke. There was a bad investment that happened, and he blamed her father. And then, you know, more stuff ends up coming out about it. And she has a fiance, and the fiance and the fiance, or her, you know, her friend, her best friend, are like conspiring against her. And so she's, you know, dealing with that. So I thought it was a decent show, but there were some things that I felt like were kind of like a little too dramatic, you know, a little too like, oh, give me a break kind of thing, you know. So a little too silly for me. And especially like when it comes to, I noticed this about Asian dramas, is that this guy got sliced on the side, and all of a sudden he's got blood coming out of his mouth. And I'm like, we're talking about internal injuries here. He probably would die from those internal injuries, you know? It's like, give me a break. And then, the next day he's fine. And I was like, give me a break. So there are certain things that are kind of silly that I'm like, oh, this is a bit over dramatic, you know? Like, oh, all these guys have like, oh, they got blood coming out of them, you know? Like in the show there, Pursuit of Jade had it too, where he got injured, and then she's talking to him, and all of a sudden he's like coughing up blood, and I'm like, if you're coughing up blood, there's definitely some internal injuries going on here, and he's probably going to die, you know, like, come on. So I just thought that was a bit silly. I'm like, unless you go and you hurt your mouth, and then you're coughing up, you know, and then you're spitting up blood, unless you hurt your tooth or something like that, you're not really spitting up blood. You know, there's got to be some kind of issue of why you're spitting up blood. There's internal injury or something, you know? So they kind of can get a little bit too dramatic in certain things. So then, like, that's kind of silly. And something also, the other downside to Asian dramas I noticed is that I realized that they're trying to save on the cost of how much music costs and everything like that. So they tend to use the same types of songs again and again and again throughout the whole series. So you can repeatedly hear like these either one or two songs. Like in Meteor Garden, that show I watched, there was the song River by, I can't remember the name of the artist again. But they kept playing that song. And then there was another song they would play constantly. There was like at least 2 or 3 songs in that show that they constantly played all the time. And so it could get kind of like repetitive with the song, and you're like, oh God, this song again. So it depends. Like if you like the song, then it's not so bad. But if you don't like the song, then you're constantly going to hear it in the show. So yeah, there was that. So I finished off that one. Like I said, I gave it like a 5 out of 10. It was a little bit silly, and I was like, you know. And there's a couple other ones that I was like, I started it, and one of them was like, I watched like a few episodes, and I'm like, I think I'll take a break on this one because it's a little slow for me. And so I ended up like, well, I'll take a break for now. There's some action ones that look interesting to me, so I might check those out pretty soon. There's like a few action ones. There's one that's called Bloodhounds on Netflix. It sounds interesting, like some kind of like fighting show, and the main cast is pretty much all Asian, and I think they're speaking Mandarin, or it could be like Korean. It might be a Korean show, but they're speaking a different language, so I'll have to like read the subtitles for that and go from there. But it looked like an action type of show, and that looked interesting. I'm not sure if there's any romance in that one. I've been trying to stick with like the ones that have like a romance to it. I like those ones, but I will check out other stuff too. Like there's this other one that was like a zombie one that looked interesting. So I've been checking out more Asian type of movies or dramas or anything like that, because I have found that Western, you know, like stuff that comes out from America, I have not been enjoying that stuff lately. I haven't seen Project Hail Mary. A lot of people said that was really good. They really enjoyed that one. I am going to get to that one eventually, but I do need to read the book. I want to read the book first, and then I will check out the movie. Even though I go on freaking Instagram, and I'll get like clips, and I'm like, is that a spoiler for the movie? Thanks a lot, you know? So yeah, I've been wanting to watch more movies or watch more TV shows lately, because I don't know, I've been kind of like taking it slow with reading lately. I've been reading less. This is why I didn't really have a lot to talk about for the rest of this month. For when it comes to books, is because I've been taking my time with the books, or the one, like I said, that one was kind of slow to me. And so it was taking me a while to kind of like get through. I'm about halfway through of that Say You'll Never Let Go one. I was about halfway through it, and I'm like, I'm just going to take a break. And so right now, like I said, with this one here that I'm reading, that Just This Once, I am enjoying this one so far. So once I'm done with that one, if I really want to continue on with the series, I'll check out the next book in the series. Otherwise, I may end up delving into something else. There's like a Naomi Lucas book I need to read. I've been reading her Naga Bride series. She came out with like another book. I need to read that one. Hopefully I can get to that one in May. And just a reminder that May will be my last video before vacation. So when I'm done with my May wrap up next month, you won't see any videos from me until like September. Because in the summer, it gets hot. It gets hot to film in the room and everything. And I don't want like how many fans going, and then people are like, I can't hear you. I hear the fan in the background. So yeah, for me, yeah, you hear that, the fan? If I put it up on high, you could hear it. And then if I have any of the other fans going in here, you'll hear it. So it'll be hard to, for people to hear. I don't have like central air and all that stuff, so it makes it kind of like more difficult to film videos in the summertime when you're sweating your butt off. So yeah, that's why I said like I'll take a break, What I might do is I might end up doing maybe like an individual post of like, hey, I read this one, really enjoyed it, here are my thoughts on it. I may end up doing that. I may end up doing some posts in maybe June, July, or August to let people know like, hey, this is what I read. Here's the books I read for June. Here's my thoughts on them. I may end up posting that on one of my posts, community posts, but for videos, no. I won't be filming anything for June, July, or August. And it also gives me like a vacation, like away from my channel and all that stuff, I think it would be better to do that rather than sweating my butt off and being cranky, because I get cranky in the summer. I am cranky. I am irritable because I hate the heat. I hate the heat. So it's not a good time for me in the summer, and I'd rather just sit under a fan, drink something cool, and hope that, I could stay cool. That's basically what it is. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I said, I'm gonna still check out Asian dramas or anything that's interesting to me. That's like an interesting show, whether it has subtitles or it doesn't have subtitles. There are a few Asian shows that are on Netflix that are like English dubbed, like you could hear like obviously the American accents and all that stuff, or, like English accents, you could hear that. You're not hearing, the person's voice speaking to you in another language and you're reading it, they don't have the subtitles and all that stuff. Some shows do that, and those are okay, but I actually prefer hearing the actor's real voice. Even though I can't understand what they're saying, I could read at the bottom. I actually prefer the real voice rather than their lips are moving, but the speech is different, So, yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one here. Is there anything you read in the month of April that you really enjoyed? Let me know down below in the description. Or is there a show you really enjoyed? Let me know. Or a movie. Let me know down in the comment section if there was something you really enjoyed that was a movie, you know? So yeah, that's it for this video here. Have yourselves a good day. Take care of yourselves, be kind to each other, and I'll see you all on the next video. All right, bye.